Welcome back to the Band Guide. I'm your band guy, Colin, and this is another video in the 5-minute GarageBand Expert series where I'm bringing you 30 tips and tricks for mixing and recording in GarageBand in 30 days. Today, I want to talk to you about mixing in mono. You might have heard about mixing in mono. Mixing in mono is talked about, especially on YouTube, all the time, and that's because it is one of the most important and helpful ways to mix in a way that you get a mix that translates to other systems. I'll explain that a little bit more in just a moment, but the reality is that mixing in mono is the best way to know that your mix is as good as possible. Now, when we think about how we listen to music in most places in the world, it's not ideal situations, right? So when we're listening in our studio, whatever that is, if it's our bedroom, if it's on our bed with our laptop and our headphones, we likely already in that situation have a better context for listening to music than most places that we're going to hear music out in the real world. That's because in our headphones or in our really good studio monitors, depending on what your setup is like, you have really good stereo separation. You have a great left and a right stereo width, and that helps us hear everything that's happening super clearly in our mix. But out in the world, that's not really how we're going to hear music most of the time. Let's say, for example, you're playing music even on a really, really nice Bluetooth speaker, and it's even in the same room as you. Even if it's a stereo Bluetooth speaker, unless you're perfectly positioned centered between that speaker and you're standing just the right distance where you get the natural stereo spread, then the reality is that that speaker is hitting all around your room, and by the time it's getting to you, you're mostly hearing it in mono. Or maybe it's off in one corner of the room, and it's more hitting your right ear than your left ear. And even though you're getting both channels, both stereo channels, you're hearing most of them at that point kind of all at the same time. Ultimately, that's basically mono, right? So if you think about that, we need to be spending time while we're mixing in mono. Now, this is easy to do. This is super easy to do, and I definitely recommend doing it after you've set up your static mix, after you've gotten all your levels, your volume, and your panning, how you think it sounds really, really great. Set up a mono button on your session. Let me show you how to do that. It's super easy. It's super fast. If we just go to any track on here, hit B to bring up the smart window, and we go to this master track, go to output, we have our list of our plugins on our master track. Now, what we want to do is just after all the plugins that really matter to us, we want to go ahead and put on, and I'm even going to do it actually after the MV meter in this case. We're going to go ahead and put on, under imaging, the direction mixer. And all we're going to do is we're going to take this and set it to 0. So now our spread went from being 100% pan left and right to 0% pan left and right. We now have a mono mix. So if we listen to this with this plugin bypassed, but you're not so low, yeah, you're not, and then we kick it on, not so far away. So we lose that really, really wonderful left and right stereo image that we have, but we now have a mono image, and that is going to help us mix and make mix decisions that will help our mix translate better to other systems. This is super important because, as I said earlier, most of the places that we hear our mix are going to be mono to some extent. When we have things panned far left ear in a mix and far right ear in the mix, you don't have to worry about how those frequencies might interact because you're going to hear it super well. There's no overlap in those frequencies or those sources in your mix. But once you collapse them to mono, then you have to worry about how is my EQ for both of these sources? Am I able to really hear what I want from both of these sources? So it forces you to make a lot more decisions about how do I help this source stand out a little bit more, or this source stand out a little bit more. Once you clapped it to mono, everything is sitting on top of each other. So you don't have any of that separation that was helping you get space and separation in your mix. You now can only make it with EQ, volume, and compression. And ultimately, those are the main parts of a mix anyway. The panning is it's almost a sweetener. And you should pan, and you should pan wide, and you should take advantage of it. If you want a great mix, don't shy away from panning. But when you're mixing, when you're doing the EQing and the compression, spend a fair amount of your time in mono. So just create this mono switch, and then after you set your static mix where you know that you have all the volume and panning exactly where you want it to be, you can flip into mono and you can start EQing and compressing in mono, and that will really help you know that you're getting a mix that's going to translate to other systems really, really well. An important note is that you can't also spend a lot of time in solo, because if you're in solo, then it doesn't matter if you're in mono or stereo. If you're in solo, you're going to hear everything in an individual track perfectly. What really matters here is how does everything interact once we stack it all on top of each other? Once we put everything in mono, how does everything interact? Can you still hear that guitar as well as you want to? If you can't, then you might need to do some EQing that helps bring that guitar out more in mono in the context of the mix. If you do that, then you're going to have a perfect mix. Now, if you're watching this and you're saying, what's a static mix? I've put together something to help you. I've put together a free 6-step checklist to a pro mix in GarageBand. It's completely free. I'll link to it in the description below, and it just walks through the 6 steps to a pro mix in GarageBand, all the goals, all the objectives at every step. So be sure to grab that. It's completely free. Link in the description below. If this video is helpful for you, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.